So I think the assessment I would give you is that I think we've definitely made a difference. The Canadian airstrikes, the ISR, the refueling has absolutely made a difference. You know, when I came here deployed, ISIS was still on the move down the two main river valleys within Iraq, and they were being able to conduct operations to a reasonably effective degree. And although the degradation had already started, there's no doubt in my mind that our assets provided increased numbers and increased capability to both strike targets and find targets and refuel other aircraft that were doing the same thing. And very quickly after we got here, into November, ISIS had more or less been halted, and it was clear by December that definitely that halt was made, and we were starting to see a reversal in their advances. So by Christmas time, by the time we rolled into January, we actually saw that the tide had turned against them, and they were starting to have to very much change their tactics. The airstrikes were definitely making a great difference. And the Iraqi security forces were now able to turn and rather than consistently being degraded themselves or having to move backwards in a defensive mode, we were starting to enable their offensive operations. And I'm seeing that has gotten stronger and stronger since January, where we are now, where I think my overall assessment is we bought time for the Iraqi security forces to build up more forces and to actually plan a campaign plan for the expulsion of ISIS eventually.
We've talked several times also on the aspect that airstrikes are not the only solution. There is also but only the la sortie des avions. You know, it's not airstrikes. So we have I don't know 68 airstrikes, but 100 sortie of the CF-18. So it's not only airstrikes; it's also dissuasion. Correct?
Yes. Yeah, and I think if I understand your question, it's that's the advantage of the air refueling. Is the air refueler has refueled a number of other nations' strike assets. They also, for example, the Italians are providing reconnaissance aircraft, and we've refueled those aircraft. We've refueled Australian, American, French, a lot of other nations' air assets come to our tanker to receive their fuel. And so the refueler is a great capability to, we call it a force multiplier. Without those refuelers, the smaller aircraft like the fighters would end up having to do a quick mission and go back and land, and which isn't nearly, they can stay on station a lot longer by refueling in the air. So our refueler is a great capability. And the ISR platform with the Aurora. Again, those sorties, many of our sorties, Canadian sorties, have been flown by the two Aurora intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft. And it's those surveillance reconnaissance missions that provide a real solid understanding of what the enemy is doing, and they can relay pictures to the intelligence analysts who analyze those pictures, analyze video, and try to determine the operations of ISIS, where they are, what they're doing, how they're affecting the battle space. and can make some decisions. They also use those pictures and videos to develop targets.
And about the CF-18, so we saw there is hundreds of sorties of the CF-18, but only 68 airstrikes, I think. Is it because most of the sorties, the CF-18 are escorting the Polaris and the Auroras and reconnaissance?
No, that's not the case. There's no escort of CF-18s for the Polaris or the Auroras. The Polaris and the Auroras operate independently from the CF-18s. Our CF-18s are declared as strike assets, even though they're capable of air-to-air. They can be used in the escort role. Their primary mission is to be strike aircraft. There are other coalition nations' aircraft whose role is specifically for air-to-air, and they provide the roving patrols that are used to make sure that if there was an air threat, they could be used to handle that air threat. But as you know, in Iraq, there is virtually no air threat because the Iraqi forces are our partners in this, and there are no other nations that are flying enemy aircraft. ISIS has declared themselves in the information warfare campaign. They have declared in videos and whatnot that they have managed to seize some aircraft, but we assess that the threat is extremely low, that they would be able to get those airplanes airborne and use them effectively. And we're also very confident that the air-to-air assets are quite capable of protecting all of the other airplanes. So the CF-18 is used pretty much solely in the, up till now it has been used solely as a strike asset. So its job, to go to specifically to your question, the number of sorties is higher than the number of strikes, yes. It's because we don't drop on every mission. The reason for that is it takes sometimes a fair amount of time to develop a target to the point where you can actually strike it. And that process, we're very proud of how precise our targeting has been on this particular campaign. We use a lot of airborne ISR assets to really truly understand the battle space. We'll have remotely piloted aircraft, we'll have aircraft, ISR aircraft like the Aurora, watch an area for a very long period of time, and they really understand where the friendlies are and where the enemy is. And also they're watching for the pattern of life, we call it, and pattern of activity to see whether there are civilians in the area. Many of the strikes that we do are in ISIS-dominated areas, so we know that it's mostly ISIS. Then we figure out where the friendly forces are, but then, just to make sure, we'll continue to watch an area for a long period of time until we're absolutely certain that we're not going to have any civilian casualties. And then once we're happy, then we'll release the weapons so that we make sure no civilians are harmed.
And is it because of that the Syria theater is more complex, more complicated than Iraq, and then it's been a month now that we did the first airstrike near Raqqa, but I think there is no more airstrike now. Is it because of that aspect? Because Raqqa, etc., there is a lot of civilians there.
Yes, well, it is a very much more complex. One of the main reasons I would tell you why there are fewer strikes in Syria is because one of the main areas that we can get into, when you think of the word intelligence, what is intelligence? You include the people on board the aircraft, like our Aurora crews, who are watching the picture. They're gathering intelligence and they're feeding that information, either in real time or afterwards in pictures and videos, to understand the environment. Well, the other piece of intelligence that's very, very critical working in Iraq are the Iraqi security forces who are on the ground. They can tell us where they are, and they can tell us where the enemy is. And so once we figure out where they are, we know where the enemy is. Once we're satisfied there's no civilians, we can drop the bomb like I talked about. That's a very powerful, what we call human intelligence capability. We don't have that same friendly forces piece in Syria. So the dynamics are very different and complex. And the nations, the coalition is working to establish some forces that we can work with, but we also have to be very careful of who we work with to make sure that they're the folks that are going to be enduring partners. And we don't want to necessarily be empowering. Certainly we don't want to have an effort. We're not in any way supporting the Syrian regime. We don't coordinate with them at all. And we very much have to be careful of who we align with to do strikes on the ground in Syria because of the complexities of Syria. So what we rely on in Syria is many hours of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to develop targets and make sure that we are striking targets that we know are ISIS and that the risk of civilian casualties is as low as possible. Our tolerance is very low for civilian casualties, as you know.
You mentioned at the beginning that you saw that ISIS has halt his expansion. That I think it was in late December or at beginning of January. So you mentioned, or General Vance mentioned, I can remember that, that sometimes, yes, we are going to win some battles and we are going to lose some battles, but not the war. And we saw recently that near Ramadi, I think it's, ISIS has tried again to take over, to push again near Baghdad. So what do you have to say about that? About, okay, yes, we have a big effect on the north of Iraq, but now near the capital there is danger here.
Yes. So a couple of thoughts when you ask that question for me, Nicola, are one is I'm always skeptical when I hear about great gains by ISIS, because they are very the one area where I have to admit a respect, but a begrudging respect, is for their information warfare operations. They are very good at telling everybody on social media and the internet how great they are and how big they are and how powerful they are. I'm not sure if I'm not saying they're not a threat. They are a definite threat, and we take them very seriously. But when they make claims in the social media and in the internet that they are taking over Ramadi, I think it's safe to say that pretty much all the reporting that they do is usually very much built up to be something much greater than what it is. Nevertheless, we definitely know that they are still continuing to have an effect within the areas such as Ramadi. And I think it goes to show how a relatively small group of dedicated fighters can cause disruptions and harassing attacks. They're very good at planting improvised explosive devices. They've very much, they use techniques such as tunneling to go underneath things and blow things up. It would be like every big city, Baghdad is the key, like every capital to a nation, and so there's a lot of desire on their part to see if they can continue to harass Baghdad. They very much want to also do these small attacks to continue to try to show that the government of Iraq cannot protect its people, which leads into their information operations that makes the government of Iraq look like it cannot protect its people. So there's a lot of information warfare that is going on. Nevertheless, places like Ramadi, it shows the size of Iraq is quite a big nation. The numbers of their forces right now are relatively small, and we are one of the mandates of the coalition is also to help build up their numbers and train them better, and that is going on as well. It's another aspect of the campaign that doesn't get talked about a lot, but there are coalition forces on the ground that are training them, including our special forces operators up north in Erbil, as you know. And that training is starting to have its effect. There are many more forces who are being trained, and more Iraqi security forces that are feeling a lot more comfortable about their training and are going back into the fights against ISIS. And we're not just training them in one area and then sending them off. The advise and assist includes working with them closely to ensure that they're mentored as they fight the battles, so there's a lot of assistance for them, and I think that is also paying off. The Ramadi piece, I agree. There are going to be gains on both sides, where the Iraqi forces are going to be able to push them in one area, and then they're going to find an area of strength and weakness. So they find an area of weakness and they may exploit that. But the good news from my perspective as the commander, I'm not seeing where ISIS is showing itself to be able to really have a high degree of effect to do what the Iraqi security forces did, for example, in Tikrit, that we're hoping that they will eventually do in Mosul, that I know they have done in other areas around Iraq where there's not as much, shall I say, reporting. The areas around, there's been other operations where the Iraqi forces have done extremely well and have cleared areas, and that doesn't seem to get as reported as well. So overall, I would say that they're doing a much better job of clearing ISIS away than ISIS is doing offensively against them.
Okay, and so you mentioned the mission regarding the formation and assist the Kurdish forces. So what are the milestones achieved at the training center regarding the formation? Do we have a number? Okay, we have provided formation for 3 battalions or whatever.
Yeah, so the numbers for the coalition, I prefer not to talk about that, because the numbers of how many soldiers are trained is still at the classified level. It's an operational security piece that is the exact number, how many overall forces we have training and how many soldiers we've trained is still in the classified realm within the coalition, and so it wouldn't be my place to share that information.
Okay.
Regrettably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And about the coalition, we are talking a lot about the coalition, but how does it work? The coalition. Do you have to report to general? Can't remember his name. The American general. How does it work? The coalition.
Coalition, yeah. Well, it's American-led, so yes, the Americans for many years have established what's called the Combined Air and Space Operations Center in Qatar. It's a large operations center that allows the capability for coalition nations to come in and put members to help do things like the establishment of what we call the Air Tasking Order. And it's the Air Tasking Order that provides the order for General Hesterman, who is the Air Component Commander, to get his priorities articulated down to actual sorties. His priorities, General Hesterman's priorities, come directly from General Terry at what's called the Combined Joint Task Force headquarters, and that's located here in Kuwait. General Terry's headquarters, General Terry is what's known as the supported commander. So as the overall commander for Operation Inherent Resolve, which is the name for the U.S. mission, as the U.S. Leaders, it's General Terry and his staff that sets the priorities, and those priorities get translated into air priorities that are sent to the air tasking order and task all the airplanes. We have Canadians that are embedded within both of those entities. We have Canadians in the what's called the CAOC, the Combined Air and Space Operations Center, and we also have Canadians embedded within General Terry's staff at the CJTF headquarters. And those Canadians work for General Terry or General Hesterman, and they are very much involved in the daily operations. They help with things like planning, they help with operations, they help with intelligence and logistics, for example. And so the coalition really truly is all those nations who have provided up, whether they only provide the air assets or they provide air assets plus people to go work in those headquarters, or they might provide the ground assets that go in to do these building partner capacity sites that are training on the ground, or like Canada, they might provide all three of those. You know, we've provided our air assets, we've provided the people to go into the headquarters to help manage those air assets, we've provided people up on the ground in Erbil, and we've provided other people in different headquarters to help the coalition actually manage the fight.
Okay. So you're leaving soon, you're leaving the Up Impact soon. So did you already talk to your successor, General Bourgeon, and what did you say to her?
Well, of course, first I congratulated her on her promotion and her appointment as Commander of Joint Task Force Iraq. And I congratulated her and let her know that she's going to very much enjoy being the commander. It's been a real highlight of my career to kind of be the guy that somebody hands the keys to, and to be able to make a lot of the decisions that have been making such a difference over here. And I've let her know that she's got an incredible team, and that we are making a difference. And you know, some of the challenges that she'll find, mostly I've spoken to her about how it works in terms of my personal engagements with some of the other leaders within the coalition, and making sure that she understands the dynamics. One of the pieces, for example, is there's a very capable colonel who is in charge of the air assets that are in theater, and that colonel reports to her, and she wants to make sure she's not doing his job. She wants to make sure that she's doing her job, which is to stay a little bit higher up at the operational level, and make sure that those air assets are being well coordinated within the coalition, but also the relationship between all of those headquarters that I spoke about. And that was a little bit of the advice that I've given her so far.
Okay, and in fact, I completely forget one question regarding your job. What is the most challenging for you?
I think probably the most challenging piece for me was two pieces. One is for the stand-up of the headquarters and the task force itself. You know, we came into Kuwait and we had very, very little. We started with a small footprint, and we had to incorporate 600 people coming in and start operating right away. So the speed that we came in and getting everything up and running, that was a big challenge. But I was absolutely so proud of the men and women who lost a lot of sleep, had many short nights and many long days, and they worked extremely hard in very trying conditions to ensure that we could operate very, very quickly, because we knew that we had to, that our strikes were going to make a difference, and the sooner we could do that, the better. And then the other challenging aspect is exactly that, is getting to know the environment, getting to understand what we call our joint operations area, to really understand the dynamics between what's going on the ground in Iraq, and providing all that information up to my higher headquarters so they could make a decision about things like, for example, should we expand into Syria? So those are probably the two pieces I'd highlight.
Okay. And what's next for you?
For me, well, I deployed out of our joint deployable headquarters, which is known as the 1st Canadian Division, in Kingston, Ontario, and I'll be going back to that headquarters.
Okay, excellent.